Five Rings Podcast, your weekly amateur sports and Olympic sports show with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie. And now, without further ado, here's Duane Rollins.
And welcome to the Five Rings Podcast. I am Duane Rollins here in Toronto. Kevin Laramie, as always, joins me in Montreal. Quick note. We were scheduled to have an interview for our other podcast, the Two Solitudes podcast, with the USL president, Tim Holt. Unfortunately, something came up and we had to reschedule that. So if you are a listener to all of our shows and are tuning in expecting to hear Tim Holt, you're as much of a geek as we are, but you're not going to be disappointed too long. That interview will be happening a little later on this week. But let's get back to the topic at hand, the Five Rings Podcast. Kevin, how are you today?
I'm doing great. And you know what? It's not just winter in Canada, but apparently the World Cup will be in winter eventually in 2022. And you were speaking about soccer, so I'm like, I'll continue speaking about soccer and how that news broke this morning. Well, we knew it's been a couple of weeks of rumors, but it's been a month. We thought it was going to happen, and it's almost official now.
Yeah, although I'll get into my pedantic argument that it's not a winter World Cup, but really a late fall World Cup. But we'll talk about that later. The solstice does not happen until December 3rd, 21st, and that is when winter starts. Although I was told today that it might be different in Qatar, that they may not recognize fall and spring there, that they just call things winter and summer. So who knows? But at any rate, certainly that's going to be a topic in the middle. We're going to talk a little bit about the potential of a Paris bid again. We've alluded to that a few times. A few numbers I'm going to throw it at you. Let's talk a bit about the bid in Paris and whether we think that might help. But we also, as you know, if you've been listening to the show, you know that I'm a curling guy anyway. Kevin's learning about the sport a little bit. We had Lucas Punkari from the Moosejaw Times Herald on to talk about the Scotties. He was out there. The event was in Moosejaw, in case you didn't know that. But so he was covering that for the local newspaper. He's covered Scotties before. He talked to us about the experience there, what he saw that week, and what he thought of the event. So he's going to come on as an interview right after this quick break.
Really tough shot. This could be the game here. Great opportunity, though. Five Rings final stone here in two. It's close. It's close. There's a run back, and there's the attack.
Duane talks about curling on the Five Rings Podcast.
And a shot.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for Jennifer Jones.
And welcome back to the Five Rings Podcast. I'm Duane Rollins. Lucas Punkari joins us from the Moosejaw Times Herald. Lucas had a fun week out there covering the Scotties Tournament of Hearts. Lucas, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. I was at the rink from basically since last Thursday, or 2 Thursdays ago, I guess now, when the pre-qualifying started until the finals. So today has been spent recovering and sleeping, but overall pretty good.
It's a fun time, is it not?
Oh, pretty much. This got to be my second time covering the Scotties. I covered it in the Sioux back in 2010, so just as much fun then as it is now.
And I know Lucas is a big curling fan, so that had to be a good time there. Let's start with the champion, Jennifer Jones, of course, the Olympic champion, came back and won the Scotties. Was it her fourth or her fifth win of the Scotties?
This is her fifth. She won in 2005, then won 3 in a row from 2008 to 2010. So for herself, it's her fifth. Jill Officer, the second, it's her fifth. Dawn McEwen, the lead, it's her fourth. And Caitlin Laws, the third. This is her first.
And Caitlin Laws came on a couple years ago, was really key to the Olympic run last year. That rink is just sort of they're not head and shoulders, but they are dominant right now. Lucas, what is the key to their success, do you think?
I think the biggest key this week was that they peaked and were consistent the entire time. They had, and talking to both Caitlin and Jen after the win last night, the only one blip they had was on Wednesday when they lost to Nova Scotia, and that was a game where the ice fooled them a little bit. But other than that, they were rock solid. And I think that's their biggest key to their success right now over the last year or so. They've peaked at the right times at the Olympic trials and then at the Olympics, and then this year at the Scotties. I mean, on the tour this year, they were a little bit off at times. They lost some games that they usually you thought would win in their sleep, an example being the Canada Cup, where they're up 4-0 on Rachel Homan after 2 ends, and Homan scored 9 unanswered points. This event, they were the most consistent team. When other teams struggled, they were just right there and took it to them. And I think that's what made the difference for them at the moment. It makes them arguably, I guess you can't really say arguably anymore, the top team in the world in women's curling.
Absolutely. They're on record as they're in full in to try and go for the next Olympic cycle as well. Now, Jen is in her 40s now. Do you think that they're going to be able to maintain this level of play to be a real player come time for the Olympic trial? I know we're talking 3 years down the road here, but do you think it's realistic that they could go for the repeat?
Oh, I think so. I think at the moment, again, as you said, it's 3 years out. There's probably two other teams that are legit contenders. It's not like the men's side where there's like 400 teams that can easily win. Right now, I'd say it's her rank, Rachel Homans, Val Sweetings, and they're probably going to be one other strange team that maybe no one expects that gets in there. I think the biggest thing too that motivates them is the fact that no Canadian team has repeated as Olympic trials winners on both the men's and women's side. So I think that's probably a big thing too, and the fact that they've stayed together works out good that way. I think after that, though, you'll see them split up, like so many of the other teams will. But wouldn't surprise if they're not in the finals for the 2017 trials to get to the 2018 games. I'd be pretty surprised.
If we're looking at the past Scotties tournament that I had last week, I'm sort of a curling newbie, and looking at the images on TSN, it's those huge hockey type of arena that are used for those big tournaments. There's been a couple of ice problems. How can you describe the difference of playing condition as the players are used to, and when it becomes those big tournaments are really different?
For the top teams, so your Jennifer Joneses, your Rachel Homans, Val Sweetings, Stephanie Laughtons, they're used to playing at the arenas because a lot of the events now on the Grand Slam of Curling Ice or Grand Slam of Curling Tour are held at the arenas. For those teams, let's say from the Maritimes, Sylvie Robichaud, New Brunswick, Marianne Arstow, Nova Scotia, they don't play on those arena ices, and the arena ice is a little bit quicker. The curl's a lot more dramatic at the end, so you're trying to get used to that. And because you have people coming in and out, and you have bigger crowds coming in, that affects it with heat and that kind of thing, and teams get thrown off. At an arena the size of Mosaic Place in Moose Jaw, which is about 4,500, that's not as much of a problem as the bigger NHL rinks where there's more air circulating and more stuff can get on the ice. You had that problems a few years ago, or I guess more a few years ago now, about 8 years ago, with the ice in Hamilton for the Brier, which was horrific. There's a lot of picks and that kind of thing. Overall, I think, though, a lot of the ice makers know what to expect now, so the ice is really good for those events. You still get a few odd picks now and then, but compared to what it was a few years ago, it's a lot better.
I asked you that question, Lucas, because over the years there's been a lot of repeat, and the big players not always dominate, but they're always up the top of that table. And I'm wondering if the advantage for them of the experience of playing with an ice that change more often can explain why they always dominate on the Canadian level like this.
That's basically the main reason why. I've always felt that you have to be at a Scotties before you actually win it, because you got to get used to the whole atmosphere of what it's like for a week, doing all this stuff, back-to-back games. It's completely different than your regular cash field event or even your provincials. An example of that would be Tracy Horgan's Northern Ontario rink. They were the Ontario reps in 2012. They ended up 4-7. This year they come back as Northern Ontario rep. They win pre-qualifying, and then they finished 6-5 and pushed Rachel Homan's team right to the limit to get in there. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, A, they know what to expect being on arena ice, and they've been there before. So, like you said, I think a lot of that comes down to, hey, now we know what we're going to deal with, and we can get through it. For a new team, it's like, whoa, we've never done this before. We're not sure what this is going to be like.
Lucas, a couple questions here. The pre-qualifying, you mentioned it a bit there. It's a bit controversial, I think, because anytime there's a change in something that's happened for a long time, and for those that don't know, this is the first year that it's taken place. It's happening at the Brier as well. Just what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's the right approach?
I like it to the extent that you have the round robin at the bottom actually mean something. Like the games between Quebec and New Brunswick at the end of it was Quebec and New Brunswick on the Tuesday night, and then Wednesday was New Brunswick and BC. Those actually meant something now, because you're curious as to what of those three teams would end up being at the bottom. End up being BC, finished 1-11 or 1-10, I should say. To that, however, not seeing both Carrie Galusha and Sarah Colton's team there was a bit disappointing. And I think you could legitimately have a 14-team field if you did it a la the junior setup at the moment where they have them divided into two pools. So you'd have a pool A and a pool B, and then at the end of the week, or at part midway through the week after each team has played each other one time, so you have 7 games to draw a record from.
Mm-hmm.
The top 4 advance to the championship round, the bottom 3 or 4 advance to the seeding round, which determines where they're grouped for next year. Will they do it at a national level? Oh, God, no, probably not. For the Briar or the Scotties. So I think it's the best method you got right now. And I'm a soccer fan, so I enjoy the relegation format there a lot. So obviously I'm going to be for the Scotties and Briar level. I could see, though, why so many people don't like it because their province isn't going to be there. But if you're going to be struggling, I think it kind of motivates people to get better and maybe go do more events on the tour.
If we're looking at this season, it's coming slowly to an end. What's next for the winner of the Scotties Tournament of Art now?
Scotties winner, that being Jennifer Jones, will be heading to the Worlds, which will be held in Sapporo, Japan, mid-March. It's right after the Briar ends. I think it's like the 14th to the 22nd, and she's trying to become the first Canadian team to win a world title since 2008, which actually she won. She won that one over Denmark, I believe. It should be a pretty good field. The fields are still being determined. Scottish curling heroine Eve Muirhead's going to be there, so I'll be very interested in that.
As will we.
Jennifer Jones obviously is going to be there. They'll be your 2 favorites. The rest of the field, I think, is still being determined. So I would imagine if Margaret Reefer Sigurdsson, the silver medalist from the last Olympics, is the Sweden representative, she'd be right there as a favorite. Anna Sidorova is going to be there from Russia. But the interesting story is Lena Fulcher, who won last year for Switzerland and upset Rachel Homan's team in the final. She didn't even make the playoffs in the Switzerland playdown. She ended up 5th, which goes to show you how crazy the depth is for Swiss women's curling. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think you could pencil in right now Jones, Muirhead, and if Sigurdsson's there as the 3 favorites. But again, it's hard. We'll see how the entire field looks in a couple weeks.
Last year's representative of the Worlds, of course, was Rachel Homan. She looked set for a Jones-Homan showdown until they played in that round-robin game, and then there's something mental happened to that team, to her in particular. I think I don't know if you agree with that, whether that's a fair thing to say. She's had a previous blow-up too at the world level. Rachel, we're talking about here now. Just is there something? Is that the weakness in her game? Do you think? Do you think there's a mental thing that she needs to get over? Maybe she's a little too intense sometimes. Is that a fair assessment?
I think the biggest thing that I found from the games that she had lost, I'll exclude the Jones and Sweden games, because those were back and forth in a round robin. The ones that were more eye-popping, obviously, were the upset loss to Nova Scotia and the one in New Brunswick that set up the winner-take-all between her and Northern Ontario on Friday morning, the last round robin draw. I just think she was off, as opposed more to a mental thing. And when the Homan team is off, as I've noticed before last year in the finals against Switzerland at the Worlds, at the Canada Cup against Val Sweeting, they're off big time. Rachel had missed a few takeouts in that during the course of the week that I thought she could make in her sleep. And it was just execution more than anything. I mean, the last couple of playoff games they set up, the bronze medal game yesterday, yes, it's the bronze medal game, but I think the entire team averaged something like 87%. They were lethal. And as they mentioned, too, they both mentioned, this is a transition year for the team. Alison Kreviazek, who's moved to go to Sweden and is living with her boyfriend, Fredrik Lindberg, used to be on Nicholas Sedin's team. She'd been curling with Emma Miskew and Rachel Homan for 15 years. So that's obviously going to be a big shift when you bring in someone new like Joanne Courtney, and that's what Joanne and Rachel talked about. They treated this year sort of like a new team. So to the layman's, yeah, third's going to be disappointment, but for a new team, more or less, I think they still did pretty all right. Yeah, they haven't had the success they would have last year, but I think it's one of those things. They're building towards 2018, just like when Caitlin Laws was brought into the Jones team, they were building towards 2014 Olympics. Yeah, it's a disappointment for Rachel, but I think at the end of the day, they're probably still going to be upset they didn't win, but they know that they got a few things they can work on, work out some kinks, and then if they don't win Ontario Provincials next year, I'd be slackshod. So I think we'll see them back at the 2016 Scotties and, again, being a legit threat to win it.
Moving away from the Scotties itself, I want to talk a bit about the tour and the growth of that. Just in a general sense, how important is the continued growth of that tour to establishing a greater depth in the game and at the women's side in particular?
I think it's good if you're going to get more teams on the arena ice, if you're going to expand it and have as many events as the men, because as of this year, the TV Grand Slams, I think there's 3 now. It used to be just 2, but there's 3 now that the women's are taking part in along with the guys. So if you continue to expand and have more women's events, that's going to be good, especially if you get some of those teams coming in that you don't see on a regular basis. You're going to see obviously your Netowins, your Joneses, Lautons, Homans. But a team like Julie Hastings, you may see more often, or a team like a Tracy Horgan, you might see more often. And a few of the younger junior teams are starting to come up. They play more on the arena ice, and there you go. They got more of that atmosphere, and they know how to do it. I would hope, though, that you start to see more people come out, because as much as I enjoy the Grand Slams, I feel like I'm in a minority when it comes to fan support, and usually there's not a lot of those big crowds, maybe the 4,000 seaters. The 2,000 seaters, I think, would be all right, but other than that, I think it's going to take a little bit to get kind of people more interested in that going on, because they know what the Scotties are like. That's a brand. They know what the Briar's like. But the Masters of Curling or Canadian Open, unless you're a diehard curling junkie, you're not going to pay too much attention to it.
And there are better competitions in many ways, because you have a higher level of competition across the board, because you're not restricted by provinces. But I think people just like that cheering interest, right?
Oh, for sure. And I think, too, the fact that you're going to see, you have the possibility of a New Brunswick knocking off Rachel Homan. You're not going to get that on the tour. On a tour, you're going to get, it's Rachel Homan versus Jennifer Jones. That's cool, but what's it mean in the grand scheme of things? Yeah, they know they can win money, or they can get CTRS points towards the trials, but you know what I mean? It's not that tangent out there like, okay, this is the Scotties. We know what this means, as opposed to a World Curling Tour event or Grand Slam event. I think that's something that those in charge will probably have to fix up and kind of get more people interested that way.
Absolutely, Lucas. One last question before we let you go. The Briar's coming in about a couple of weeks. What do you expect for the Briar?
Insanity. I think there's at least, you could make a case for 9 of those teams to legitimately win the thing, and I don't think it'd be far off. Who do I think is going to win it? I've had a hunch since about the fall that it's going to be Brad Gushu of Newfoundland Labrador. He's good in odd number years, and he's got Mark Nichols back. So my soon-to-be wrong prediction will be Brad Gushu wins the Briar over Northern Ontario's Brad Jacobs.
Thanks again
That's
for
a bold
Lucas for
prediction.
taking some
Lucas
time. He had a
Punkari,
busy
thank you very
week,
much for
and
joining
he
us
was
on
giving
the
up some
Fire
sleep
Podcast
to
today.
come talk to us.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot
If
for
you've
having me
never
on,
covered
guys.
a curling event, and I suspect most of you have not covered a curling event, but if you, I have, so I can speak a little bit of experience here. It is a lot because there are 3 draws a day up until the final weekend, where it slows down a little bit for you. So you're constantly at the arena, even though these are big arenas like in Moosejaw, as Kevin asked in the interview. There's still, you're down close to ice, your feet are cold, you're standing a lot. It's a tiring event, and that said, it's pretty fun too. So we're not complaining about that.
And long hours. A game is, 3 hours? Apparently, one draw?
It's similar to here in North America. I equate it almost exactly in terms of pacing and timing to a baseball game, with each end being an inning. That's a good way to think of it if you're thinking about the time. So yeah, it takes about the same amount of time.
So imagine covering 3 baseball games a day for 8 days straight, nonstop. Yeah, it would go probably insane.
Yeah, well, it's 3 baseball games a day while you're watching 4 different baseball games that are happening exactly at the same time.
So it's even more mind-boggling and probably mind-melting to watch all that.
Now, I'm sure with Lucas that he was watching more closely to the Saskatchewan events, because he was covering it for Moosejaw, although as the host, they would have been trying to cover the whole event in a bigger way. But so you're focusing in on one specific game. For the National Curling event a few years ago, it was the juniors, the Canadian Junior Championships, which aren't quite as big as these ones, but they're set up the same way, or at least they were then. So yeah, I was focusing in, because I was for the Charlottetown Guardian, I was focusing in on PEI. But yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of standing around and waiting. But it's a fun time. It's a good event to cover. One of the things I guess I might as well tell a quick anecdote. I've been sort of holding this one back for a while. One of the reasons that I think a lot of people like curling, like to watch curling, is, and I think this perfectly illustrates it, is when I was covering the PEI rank back, and we're talking a decade ago now, but when I was doing it, the skip for PEI was actually the son of a very famous curler here in Canada by the name of Russ Howard. Russ Howard was the gold medalist as 3rd in 2006 for the Gushi rank. They brought him in at the last minute to sort of supplement that team and put them over the top. He before that was a guy in the pre-Olympic era of curling, which was a superstar in the sport. So this is a guy that is famous in Canada. He's a famous athlete in Canada. He's an Olympic gold medalist. I'm covering his son in this event, and midway through the tournament, I'm running out of things to write about PEI because PEI wasn't very good. so you couldn't really, focus in on the scoreboard aspect of it because it was beginning to get a bit old. So I'm looking for color kind of stories to make things pop a little bit more. And I look to my right and I see at the bar, I see the Olympic gold medalist, a famous curler, a guy that people ask for their autographs in this country routinely, Russ Howard, standing there. So I get the bravery up. I walk over. I say, "Excuse me, Mr. Howard, I'm covering your son for the Charlottetown Guardian this week. Would you mind having a conversation with me about what curling has meant to your family?" And, normally if you're going to talk to an Olympic champion, you're going to have to jump through some hoops. You're going to, at the very least, have to prove your worth and maybe prove who you are a little bit, go through a PR rep, whatever. But not curlers. I walked up to this guy while he was buying a beer. He slapped me in the back and he said, "Sure, son, sit down," bought me a beer, and we had a 20-minute conversation.
He bought you a beer on top of it?
Yeah, we had a 20-minute conversation about, I probably shouldn't have drank the beer. I was working. But alas, we had a 20-minute conversation about the importance of curling for his family and what his son was and how proud he was to watch his son in a national championship and so on and so forth. And that was the accessibility of the sport that everyone loves. Last note on that, there was an article by Sean Fitzgerald, National Post, is a good writer there that I've dealt with a few times in the past, a good guy to read if you want. He wrote an article about how some people in the curling world are fearing that the increasing success of it, the increasing popularity of it, the Olympicness of it is taking, quote unquote, the soul away from the game. And what they're alluding to is that maybe nowadays I wouldn't be able to walk up to Russ Howard in the bar and have a beer bought for me. And I don't know whether that's the case or not because I'm not around the sport close enough anymore. But let's hope that there's an element of that remains because it's one of the things that makes the sport special.
Well, it's a big difference, too. Back then, those curlers didn't really consider themselves athletes. Yes, they did in a way, but they were part of the people in a way. They had jobs. They were regular Joes and Jane out there just being good at curling. Nowadays, it's a job, it's a focus, it's a dedication that are bringing the game to a different level, but yeah, they're becoming athletes and personalities. And everything that comes with that, we're starting to see as well, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the best way to think about it is that back in the day, the elite level of curling was maybe the equivalent of your national amateur golf championships. So it's like golf pros. They're really good at what they do, and within the circle of the people that lived in that world, they were known and appreciated. But beyond that, it was kind of a niche-y, kind of quirky thing. But now that it's out there and in front and center, and a lot of people just have taken to it, it's in the States. They have it on TV now, and it's not as much as here by any means, but they can certainly see it. And there's a lot of people that really enjoy it because they understand how strategic it is and how interesting it is and how thoughtful it is. And again, I go back to that baseball analogy. A lot of people that made fun of it for how slow it was in the past in terms of the pacing of that now are learning to appreciate it in the same way that a baseball fan will appreciate his sport for how much of a thoughtful game it is too. It combines the brain and the brawn in a lot of ways. You have to physically be able to do what you're doing, and what they're doing out there is incredible if you know the sport at all. But at the same time, you also have to have your brain on all the time, and that's why people love it so much and why it's becoming more and more popular. But you're right. Are they, is Caitlin Laws just a Jane Joe? Anyway, probably not. She's, on posters and on billboards and is on an advertisement where she's pretending to arm curl a curling rock. Like these people aren't really Jane and John Joes anymore.
Exactly. But anyways, it's still interesting to me, like you alluded earlier. I am starting to I did always appreciate it, but I'm starting to be really interested in the strategies and the mindset going to a full draw into a tournament, facing a team that you're going to face later on. If it's two favorite that are facing each other in the round robin, you keep your game hidden, and it's very gamesmanship in a way, that the curling game, and it's intricate to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And Utah asked Lucas in the interview about the ice and how the ice plays a role and how the ice is different in the arenas versus the curling clubs. They were talking about that in the broadcast all week too.
But it's huge, right? It's a huge aspect. It's like 90% of the thing because it's the only. It's a constant in curling, which is different in any other sport. There's a constant that changes throughout the game, and if everything affects that, that's why it was mind blowing to me when I was listening to the coverage.
Yeah, well, one of the things they said, and this is kind of interesting in a way, is that at the elite level, beyond the fact they're elite teams playing, some of the shots that they can make there are only makeable on perfect ice, which they're getting close to perfect ice at these big events, or perfect ice in the terms of arena ice. If they're in curling clubs, the ice is so cruddy, and it's sometimes shared with hockey in like a really small center, that they can't make shots with the same level of subtlety, especially your draws and like the tick shots where they move the guards off and all that. They're almost impossible to make in a curling rink, not just because the level of competition isn't as good, but the ice just certainly won't allow it. It's too bumpy. You have to do more stronger weights to get it down there. You have to do more takeout games, all that sort of stuff. That's why you'll see a lot of young up and coming rinks that they're much better at their takeout game than on their draw game and on their subtle light game, simply because the ice that they play on week in, week out is lends itself to that sort of game. So that's another interesting aspect. Before we move on, real quickly, just in terms of my thoughts on the event, Jen Jones won, and I think that she beat Val Sweeting in the final. It was kind of, Rachel Holman was the expected final, but I said, I think when the preview, if you listen back to it, I gave the other rink that had a chance was the other one that was in the final. It's 2 years in a row. She's lost the final now, by the way. She is increasingly becoming head and shoulders better than everyone else because she is the shot maker. If you go to the Five Rings podcast Twitter feed, I tweeted out a link to the shot that a decade ago that won the 2005 Scotties for Jen Jones. It's an in-off shot, which means you hit a rock that was outside of the rings, redirected your rock inside the rings to take out another rock. It's an incredibly difficult shot to make, as you can picture in your own head. It's a famous shot in Canadian curling circles and world curling circles that won a national championship for it. So that's where she truly and first kind of jumped on the scene as this amazing shot maker. The point I'm making with this is that she is an incredible shot maker, but she's also, now that she's older, has become increasingly more mental and strong, incredibly strong mentally, to the way that she handled the Olympics. As illustration of that is what sets her above and beyond. She knows how to peak. She knows how to perform when it matters the most. And when you look at her main competition in the next few years, Rachel Holman, I think, as I asked Lucas in that he sort of thought it was just a bad week for her. But I think that, at 25, 26, where she's at now, that there is the difference between the two rinks, that she just needs a few more years of getting it done and figuring out what it feels like to be part of that at that elite of the elite level before she can truly take that next step. Because of a pure talent level, she's right there, and that rink is right there, and they will be a force to reckon with. And I think that they probably are going to be the two that are going to be battling out to go to South Korea.
We talked a lot about curling the last couple of weeks, and there's just a quick question I want to ask you, and it's probably going to turn out to be not as quick of a question. What are the difference of skills and mindset between the captain, the skip, and the other position on the team? That's a question I've always wondered. Why is the captain and the other ones in the hierarchy?
Well, it's an experience thing, and a lot of people, I know some people that curled at a fairly high level. I'm not going to say, I know people that have curled at the highest level, but fairly close with, or have been in the past anyway, that were at a fairly high level that could have skipped but didn't like skipping because it just didn't fit their mentality. For instance, I had a good friend for many years that I lived with briefly that was an Ontario level player, and she curled at the second position, the vice position, because she preferred, it just fit her skills. She likes sweeping. She was a good sweeper, and that's the biggest and most obvious answer is the front end, which is your first and second shooter, have to be strong sweepers because they're most often on the broom. And a good sweeper, people make fun of it. The sweepers are part of it, but the sweeper can actually pull a rock 2-3 feet if they're good enough. in terms of where it wouldn't go on its own. So she was good at that part of the job. She was strong. She was athletic. She liked that part of the job. But beyond that, whenever she did skip, because she skipped at her local rink, she would get too worked up from it. She would come home from her women's league where she was a skip. And again, this is just local level, but a local level at a fairly big rink. So it was fairly competitive. And she would be so wired that she couldn't sit still for, an hour after she'd get home. It just wasn't her personality. She couldn't handle it emotionally. She needed to be part of that team. So that's a big part of it. Your third thrower is often – I often think of it as a mentor position now. A lot of people, they're younger, but they're highly skilled shot makers often. It's an important shot-making position because it sets up the final rocks at the end. And but they maybe don't have the complete mental game under control yet, so they are looking to work on that and to make it better. And then the skip has got the most experience and is the person that's ultimately making the call, so they have to have that confidence, that level of confidence that not everyone has. It's not for everyone. I think that if you look back to the Olympics last year, the Jacobs ring, it was their front end that won them that gold medal in my mind. The front end is immensely important in terms of setting an end up, but more so, as I just said, the sweeping throughout it. And as I said in the Olympics, it was the front end is every bit as important as anything else. Same with Jen Jones's ring too. If you look at Officer and McEwen, they are key to that ring's success, even though they don't get to make the glory shots very often.
All right, that actually clears it up for me a lot. I can actually understand now what's the people's role in the team.
All right. This was a long segment, longer than we thought, so let's take a really quick little bumper here, and then we'll come back and we'll break down the Paris Olympic bid and the World Cup, the Fall World Cup. Welcome back, and as I said, we went a little longer there than we thought we were going to, as we often get me talking about curling, right?
As we always do, Duane. We always go longer.
Yeah. We're going to go tight.
2 hours later, that was a 2-hour show.
All right, so I guess the biggest news today, and we'll start with that, is that it's sort of kind of fully been confirmed finally what we've known for a long time, that the 2022 World Cup will be indeed a quote-unquote winter World Cup. Putting aside the fact that it's not officially winter until December 21st, and this World Cup would take place almost entirely in the time before December 21st, the idea is that the final would be December 23rd.
Wow.
So all but 2 games would take place before December 21st, so it is actually a fall World Cup. Putting that aside, which I didn't really put aside, did I? What does this mean to the world calendar? And we've talked about this a bit in the past. I think that this is a difficult thing to talk about because it's the right decision to make now that the wrong decision has been made, if you follow what I mean by that, Kevin.
That's a good point. But you know what I just realized when you mentioned that the final was going to be on December 23rd? It's going to be a Christmas World Cup. Have you any idea the amount of media and the amount of buzz worldwide they're going to be this year? It's going to be treated as a special off. Yeah, we all know the allegation and the weird way that Qatar got the World Cup. But now that it's almost official that it's going to be a Winter World Cup, what all that entails, the new marketing ads that Christmas and World Cup are going to be together, we're going to be stuck with that forever after that, Duane.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd go a step further. Why the hell hold it on the 23rd? Just go all in. 25th of December, World Cup. Let's do it up.
Let's do the finals on Christmas. Why not? Yeah, you're
Why
right.
not? Nothing else to do that day after you finished opening the presents. Let's go kid ourselves. Anyway.
It's the only way to get bars to open that day, right?
Yeah. Head out to the bar. Okay, thanks, Mom, Dad. Bye, Nana. I'm going to watch the bar game.
And with the time difference, the final could be on Christmas Eve, the nighttime.
That'd be awesome.
Go all out. Do that. At midnight on December 24th, the 2022 World Cup Finals.
You could have Santa fly in with something like that'd be awesome. Right.
There's going to be no red card in that game. There'll be red noses.
Exactly. Look, seriousness aside, like it's going to screw up the European schedule, and by the European schedule, I of course mostly mean England, which is why they're freaking out there. It's because they're set to lose a lot of money in December. There's no doubt that the English holiday season is for fans of the English game is one of their most favorite times a year. And I, speaking from a personal level, I love it because there's games all the time. You've got your Boxing Day game, which is a massive tradition in England. They're going to lose that year for that, and it's going to be a real shame to them, although maybe they'll figure something out if the World Cup ends 2 days later. They'll probably fly them back home quickly to play them because they don't really give much thought to their physicality at that point.
They'll play that match day in Qatar, Duane. They'll play that match day in Qatar.
Yeah, exactly. Although what they'll probably do, I suspect, is that they will just play the championship or something. They'll play games in the 26th, I bet, but it won't be the Premier League because the Premier League, of course, has to, to be serious, has to give them a break in terms of their contracts and that with the players. But look, that's the biggest upset that it's going to have, but it's a commercial consideration. And that's why we talked about it last week, with the North American angle. I don't know what they're going to do in Europe, but in the North American angle, they essentially extended the TV rights to sort of appease people. Look, people are people are angry that it's in Qatar. They are. And we understand that from a pragmatic level. It was dumb to put it in a place where it's 50 degrees Celsius in the summer. It really was. And we understand that it was probably not above board. Right? But it's not wrong to try to go into a new region of the world. And this is where I always get a little bit ambivalent here, that I do recognize all the problems with the bid, but I do also recognize that trying to go into the Middle East, trying to find a way to make it work in the Middle East, to include another part of the world, is not wrong. Even though there are some of us in some places that have concerns about that part of the world, I think that those are concerns that we need to put aside and embrace and include in the world family when it comes to this game. So on that level, even though it's got there in the wrong way, I was never in favor of pulling it because that would be just basically a slap to them, right? Fine, you don't belong. We're going to pull it out now. So it got there the wrong way, but at this point in time, we need to find a way to make it as right as we can now that the wrong thing has happened. And one of the things that needed to happen, the thing that most needed to happen with this, is we needed to not kill players on the pitch.
No, you're right.
So now there will be, that had to, now that it's going there. And again, pulling it from there would have caused problems that, like, you would have lost an entire region, and they can't do that. And it would have been a slap in the face to a lot of them there that don't necessarily share the same concerns about corruption and things like that. And that's a problem, but at the same time, they don't even see the same issues that we're doing here. They just see it as the world pulling them out because England wants to play games on Boxing Day, and that wouldn't necessarily fly. So now that it's done, we needed to play the games in November. We obviously did. That should have been up front in the bid. There's no doubt about that. I'm not defending the stuff that happened that got us to this point, but for God's sakes, it had to be in November. So we move on and we move forward and we figure it out.
And it'll be in November to remember for once.
And November to remember. It's my birthday that month. So there'll be World Cup games on my birthday. That'll be fun.
And I can bet you that's going to be the tagline for the 2022 World Cup too. The November to remember World Cup.
There you go. We're going to talk about the Paris bid, and I just wanted to mention some numbers out there. One thing that really jumped out at me, there's some serious talk about whether they're going to go forward. For those that don't know, the deadline to submit your bids for 2024 is September 15th. So all the cities into the bid will be in by then. Paris is in the hardcore discussions. The decision will be made around then. They are claiming that 97% of the bid, which is estimated to be, let me get the number down here exactly, 6.2 billion euros, will be covered by private funds. I don't know if that's possible. That's great.
That
that's
seems
the way.
weird to me. 97%, Duane? Yeah.
I don't know where that's coming from. Now, there have been the adjustments we talked about earlier where the IOC is trying to make some changes to make more cities bid and make it more affordable for cities. Allegedly, that will create what they're saying in Paris is 1.8 billion. And again, all these figures are euros, will be from the IOC directly. When you're looking at 6.2 otherwise, so the rest of it's going to come from various fundings. They talked about some kind of 50-50 split in there for the infrastructure. when you talk about 50-50 split for the infrastructure and you're talking about $3 billion, I don't know where this 97% is coming from there. But at any rate, the more money they can get from private sectors, the better in many, many ways. We've talked about how it would be nice to go into Paris. I don't know what more to say. Kevin, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, just the fact that the reason we like that it's privately funded if it does happen is that, at least in my opinion, the backlash can be a little less. It could be lesser because there's no public fund, so the people can't really cry about, oh, you're using the public fund for things we don't necessarily need. You could use it for education, for health system. No, you're using it for sports. When it's privately funded, you take that argument off the table. So if it helps the feasibility of games, I love the fact that the private corporations get into the games.
The only caveat that people have is a lot of people have concerns about title sponsorship and things like that.
True.
The Atlanta games were widely criticized for how much over-the-top commercialism there was in there. You can't have it both ways. You can't have a massively funded private games without having, the Olympics is brought to you by the Royal Bank, right? Yep. So if you're okay with that, if you're comfortable with that, then you're going to have to address it. And I think that there's a lot of parts of the world where they resist it, but realistically, if we want to get more and more private funding involved, then you're going to have to be open to those kind of ideas. The Scotiabank triathlon or whatever. Maybe even the Canadian Olympic team would have, the Hudson Bay Company directly on the shirts. Like that stuff is stuff that they have to think about seriously if they want to reduce these costs. And it's not a topic that a lot of people like, but at the same time, what's more important? Having the games continue on and having the games open to more people, or being exposed to advertising? I don't know. It's a question to think about.
It is.
All right. Kevin, there were some great results in cross country this weekend. So why don't you, for Canada anyway, we'll be a little Canadian here for a minute. Why don't you tell the people about that?
Alex Harvey, the phenom from Saint-Féral-les-Neiges, a descendant of Pierre Harvey, who was a legend in the cross country in Canada. Well, Alex Harvey had a great weekend in the World Championship. He is the first Canadian ever to win 2 medals at a World Championship. He won in the individual sprint, a silver there, and he captured the bronze in the 30-kilometer skiathlon, which is a mass start event. So a bronze, a third place in that skiathlon, and a silver in the individual sprint, totally different type of effort as a cross-country skier. One is a sprint where you go all out and you need to have a great what's the word? Your effort is in a short it's a sprint.
Intensity. Yeah,
it's intense. But what I mean is, it's almost like a interval type of effort compared to a 30-kilometer skiathlon, where you have to control your energy, the amount of effort you're doing for the entire duration of that 30-kilometer. And a 30K race in cross-country skiing, looks a lot like a cycling race, and you have to use the same type of tactics. You have to hold back and know where to attack, and if there's a small hill and you're good climbing the hill, it could be the place where you attack well. What that weekend told us is that Alex Harvey is becoming a great all-around cyclist, and it's been a couple of years we're expecting him on the big level, and probably right now with that result, he's probably the best cross-country skier this country ever produced. But I expect big things the next 2 years for him as well.
It would be impressive if he was a cyclist out there in the snow. You slipped up there. That's fine.
No, but yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, but it's because it's so similar to me, the way the strategy, so I get them confused. Yeah. But that skier could be the best ever.
I get it, yeah. And it's funny, you mentioned his dad, who basically, we talked about it the other day, how back in the day they really had no support whatsoever, and his father absolutely would be that person. He was the Canadian cross-country ski team for years.
He made his own track to train on, Duane. And can you imagine the dedication it takes to make a multiple-kilometer track for cross-country in Saint-Féral-les-Neiges that he did? And it's probably because of that dedication that he produced a son. First of all, the genetics. Both of his parents are known athlete and genetic freaks, but Alex Harvey had the training and grew up on those skis, and you could see the dedication pay off nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. You take the genetics and the dedication and you add support, and you can produce world championship medals. Whereas back in the day, his dad, he'd be the guy that people would kind of chuckle at unknowingly when they'd see, the Canadian results at the end of the Olympic broadcast day, and you'd see Harvey finished 40th or whatever, and people like, ha ha ha, not realizing 40th in the world from what he was coming from was incredible.
Yeah,
so
a guy with just 2 planks of wood in his background, in his backyard, basically, in the winter.
Yeah, so good for the family to get those results, and it's just too bad that we don't get to see that type of stuff. There isn't. I still am holding out hope for the Olympic Channel. Then I can never leave my living room anymore. All right, Kevin, I'll let you say goodbye on our special long version of talking about curling and a few other things.
All right, for our soccer listeners, later this week, we expect to have Tim Holt on the show. Sorry again for the delay of the interview today, but look for the USL president shortly on the Two Sawtooths podcast. And a quick mention, one of the best Champions League in the world start back tonight if you're in Montreal. Casual Spa, Saint Leonard, that's where you'll find me. My studio is coming with me. Come and say hi. Come record a little something for the listeners. I'll be there waiting for you, and see you tonight. And until then, own your podium, folks.